Hello YouTube and welcome back to Old Maryland 63 C10. This is episode 6, and in this episode we're going to start mocking up the exhaust for our C10. So stick around. Just a quick editor's note. This is going to end up being a two-part video. When I started doing the project and filming making the exhaust, it got a lot longer than I expected. Part of me being rookie at doing these videos. So instead of having one real long one, I'm going to make two shorter ones. I figured that would be better for the viewers and people watching to make two shorter ones. So you may hear me reference a few things in part 1 that's actually going to go on in part 2. So bear with me on that, and I hope you stay tuned for both this video and for part 2. Okay, well, thanks for sticking around. Obviously, we're running a small block Chevy in our truck. So the first thing we're going to do to start mocking up the exhaust is get the motor and transmission with clutch linkage and shifter into the truck so that we can see what things we might have to work around to run the exhaust. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get the motor off the stand. I'm not going to put the flywheel, clutch, all those kind of things in it, just the bell housing and transmission again, because this is just a mock-up of what we're going to do for exhaust. We will discuss the motor in a future video, but for right now, let's go ahead and get it off the stand, get the bell housing on it, get the transmission on it, and get it into the frame. Okay, so we got the motor and transmission set. It's funny, I remember those transmissions being a lot lighter 20 or 30 years ago. I'm not sure what's changed, but that was a little bit heavier than I remember. But anyway, so the next thing we're going to do is put the oil filter, get the clutch linkage on, put the starter on, again, just to put things in place so when the headers go on, I know what I'm working around. So that's what's next. We'll start buttoning up a few of these odd things, and then we'll get to put the headers on. Okay, the next thing I want to do is get the starter bolted up to the block. These old cast iron bell housings that came in this truck, the starters actually bolt up with 3 bolts into the housing. Top bolt is threaded here. The bottom or the side 2 bolts are threaded in the bell housing. I got the starter off of the 6-cylinder that came out of the truck, but I think this is the original one I had way back from my 71 that I drove around when I was much younger. I think at some point I did bolt a regular starter that comes up from the bottom of the starter and bolts up to the bottom of the block, but I can't remember why I switched to that. The 6-cylinder starter, I didn't count the teeth on the flywheel in the 6-cylinder, so I'm not sure if that one is compatible with the 11-inch flywheel I'm going to run in the truck. But I know at one point this one was original to the motor that was in the car, and before that in the truck. I will obviously test it before we officially put this in, but again, this is just for fitment of the headers and then running the exhaust. So let's go ahead and get this bolted up. Okay, so we're back on the other side of the truck. We're going to go ahead and get the clutch linkage and the springs in. Again, just to see if it'll clear the header before we start working on exhaust. The first thing we need to put in is the stud that goes on the side of the block. And small blocks actually have two threaded holes here for the clutch linkage. I think my Camaro had a bracket that went between the two, and the clutch ball is set back here. But for the truck, it just goes right here in the front. So we'll spin this on real quick, give it just a light snug, and that's all we need to do for right now, just to give it a little bit there. So I think I'd mentioned earlier that on my parts truck, the bracket that holds the Z-bar on is riveted to the frame, and this one was bolted. And in this case, I'm actually glad they bolted this one down, because I don't think I could get the Z-bar on with this locked in place. On my Camaro, it had a slot cut in the top of the bar here so that you could sit the Z-bar in and slide it back. But this one doesn't seem to have that. So what we're going to do is we got to go ahead and put the Z-bar on. And then this goes over top of it. And like I said, I'm lucky it was not bolted down, because then we can go ahead and get our bolts back in it and get it tied to the frame. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, again, these don't have to be too tight, so we're just going to go ahead and snug these down real quick, and that'll be enough. Okay, so the next piece, and again, this was all missing in my original when I got the truck, so somebody on Facebook had this and was able to sell this to me, and I'm much appreciated. Okay, and that's all we need to do for right now to be able to just hold things together, to start fitting the headers and then working our way back. Okay, so I got a set of Headman headers. They're ceramic coated. They come with the bolts for the collectors, and of course the collectors themselves. These, I guess, kind of swivel on the bottom for a little bit of clearance, which will probably be pretty nice. And they come with, of course, the bolts for bolting the header to the motor. Got to unpack the driver's side one here. I did get the passenger side out just to take a look at that. I will say they are pretty heavy. They're much heavier than headers that I remember in the past. I do have a gasket to go along with it. And we're going to test these to see how they fit here in a second. And just in case, if anybody's wondering, there is the part number for the headers. So let's go ahead and get the driver's side one out of the package, and we'll start testing these to see how they're going to fit. Okay, that's the passenger side. Okay, the driver's side went on pretty easy. Was a little bit tighter than on the passenger side. Just a couple things to note. I will have to bend my dipstick tube over a little bit. It's just touching the header there, so we'll have to kind of re-bend that tube a little bit. As far as the clutch linkage, the Z-bar, the oil filter, we're pretty good down there. Plenty of space, it looks like, to work and to get the header in there. The one thing is it did bump into, there is a brake line junction block They probably can't see it from up here. That's on the back of the cross member, and the header is touching that. So when I put new brake lines on, I'm gonna have to try to remember to straighten that bend out a little bit or move the block a little bit. So one of the things I bought for the truck for the exhaust are these, I guess, exhaust plates that allows you to drill through the trailing arm cross member, and then you bolt these plates in, and it allows the exhaust to go up through the cross member. So I know a lot of guys probably use these on trucks where they really drop them pretty low to the ground. I'm not going to be doing that, but I just thought it'd be cleaner to be able to run some of the exhaust up inside the frame rails through the cross member to the mufflers. So to that end, I've got my muffler sort of sitting here in the position where I think it's going to be. Before we run pipes, want to essentially start with the end in mind. I spent some time leveling the chassis, again, just in case I'm measuring off of the frame rails. I know side to side it's level. And again, the muffler is just sitting there. The piece of wood on top is just to show where the bed cross sill is going to go, just to make sure I'm below that. So the plates, or the kit comes with this plate that's essentially the template that you would drill through in order to make the hole. So it's got one big hole up here in the corner where the bolt will go through to steady the plate. And down here in the frame, there's two holes that it will go on. And one of them is a little bit further in, and one of them is a little bit further out. So for what I'm gonna do, and where I have the muffler sitting, I'm gonna use the outside hole, which will go essentially right there, because I think that lines up a little bit better with the muffler than where it would sit if it was in here, basically at this hole. So I think that's just a little bit further away. So I'm gonna use this outside hole. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the plate bolted up. I'm gonna drill a couple of these holes out so it will hold a little better. And then hopefully cut these through with a hole saw to be able to attach these brackets. Okay, so we got the plate bolted in, got the muffler and everything out of the way so we can work. I did drill this extra hole up on this top side here to help steady the plate. And the plate has this pilot hole in the middle here. Now the key to this is drilling from this side back here so that I don't go through and cut the template, because I need one more shot at this. So we're gonna get started drilling this and see how long it takes us to get through. So I got the exhaust cutouts in. I have to say that was a little bit more of a challenge than I expected, mainly because I probably don't have the right tools. I did this with a hole saw, and I ended up going through a couple hole saw blades to try to drill through the frame. So the plate that comes with the cutouts, of course, has a pilot hole for the hole saw to go through. And what I found out is after a while, this hole starts to open up a little bit from just trying to, put enough force on the bit to be able to get it to cut. So as this hole kind of waddled out a little bit, a 4.5 inch hole saw blade wanted to kind of spin around in there, and it wasn't cutting as true as I'd hoped. So if you have a plasma cutter, even a torch or something like that, I would probably recommend using that instead of a hole saw, even though it is kind of designed to use a hole saw. For the effort that it took to put them in, it's going to help make my exhaust a little bit cleaner. I don't know that I had to have them. Again, I thought it would make it a little bit cleaner, but for the effort that it took to get them in, I guess I'm still wondering how much it would be worth it. Now, it would be nice in case I do end up sitting the truck down lower than I initially do. They'll be in there in case I do need to run the exhaust in a different way in order to get more ground clearance. As far as the kit itself, I mean, it's pretty stout. I have no complaints really about that. The only thing I had to do was on this second one, the first one after I was able to cut the hole, you have to re-drill your frame up in increments of sizes in order to get these big bolts through. So after doing that on that side, that plate bolted up with no problem. This one, the holes didn't line up as well, but I think that's as much because even though I had the plate bolted pretty tight to the frame, it waddled, again, as it waddled it out and shifted this, the whole hole saw around. When I went back and drilled these holes, the hole saw had kind of drifted over a little bit. So I had to open up the holes in the plate in order for it to bolt up cleanly. So it's in. If anybody's going to do this, I would recommend something besides a hole saw, or just be prepared that it's going to be a challenge. And the other thing, obviously, goes without saying, but make sure you have some really sharp drill bits, because I didn't when I started. I thought I did, but then when it came time to actually drill through the frame, it was not as easy. So I had to get some new drill bits and get rid of some of my old ones in order to make these holes. So other than that, let's move on to getting the pipes run. Now that we've got the cut throughs in, again, I'll get my mufflers kind of where I think I want them, but now let's start working from the header back to the cutouts. So as we get ready to start cutting the exhaust, I just wanted to show a couple of things that I did to prepare to make the exhaust. Besides some of the tools got scattered out here, of course I have a small little level that I'll use. Markers, I'm going to use the zip ties to be able to zip tie around a pipe to be able to make marks, or you know, draw a line across the whole circumference of the pipe. Measuring tapes, square, adjustable angle finder. Of course, my Sawzall. I'm not sure if I'm going to use the Sawzall. I might. It's metal cutting, so it's out. And the other thing I did was I made this little jig. And with the U-bends I have, I can put the edge of the pipe along here, and then these lines are for 22.5, 45, and then I have a 90. This one over here is just whatever, 67, again 45. So I can lay the pipe in here, and the bend will start right about here, so that if I know I want a certain angle, I can put the zip tie on here, on the pipe of course, and then mark, and I'll be close to my close to the angles that I want to make for the cut. The other thing I did to prepare for making some cuts in the pipe, if I have to make some pie cuts, if the angles I have in my U-bends for my pipes aren't exactly right, or I need to, again, make pie cuts to make some odd angles, I came over here and I put a piece of tape on my chop saw, and this black line is 1.25 inches up off the base. So if I need to make the pie cuts, I make a line down the center of the pipe, make one cut on this side, rotate the pipe around, and make the other cut, and that'll give me a pie cut. So not sure if I'm going to need those or not either, but again, I'm just preparing to start cutting the metal pipe for the exhaust. Okay, everybody, that's going to wrap up part one. I hope you like and subscribe our videos, and we hope to see you back here in a bit when we do part two, which will actually be running the exhaust pipe. So thanks for watching.